Welcome to Jim's Moving Picture Show. Welcome to Jim's Moving Picture Show, where the popcorn is buttery, the jokes are cheesy, and the movies are scary. Or funny. Or he's a little all over the place. And now your host of the Movie Picture Show, a guy who's seen Jaws a million times, has a zillion movie t-shirts, speaks fluent movie quotes, a guy who really should get out more. Here's your host, Jim Christopher.
And welcome everybody to episode 2 of Jim's Movin' Picture Show. I'm trying to do the Pennywise dance where I dance like this, but I hold my head still. Should have done that last episode. This is our second episode, and we're going to continue to talk about great horror movies and great movie marathons you can put together. We've got Daniel back. We've got Gary back. And this one, we thought it's appropriate for our second episode to do part 3s. So jumping in at number 10 on our best third movies. I feel like I might have messed some of these up and I'm going to get yelled at. But I'll be honest, if anybody other than Daniel and Gary yells at me for getting one wrong, then I don't care. Daniel and Gary can talk to me. That's it. No, I'm just kidding. You can too. But I have number 10, Pumpkinhead 3, Ashes to Ashes, mostly because the Pumpkinhead franchise is awesome. This movie is awesome. And put aside the goofy effects and the goofy storyline, you'll have a great time watching this flick. Now, speaking of great franchises that probably go overlooked by a few people, except for the aforementioned Daniel Baldwin and Gary C. Warren, the Prophecy series with Christopher Walken as like a guardian angel bent on delivering people to hell. It's Christopher Walken. He's an evil angel. Lots of people die creatively. There are more than 4 of these movies, I think. The third one should be on your watch list.
What are you?
Judgment.
Now, I mentioned in the last episode that sometimes my snooty horror movie friends don't like movies that other people like because, oh my God, God forbid people like things. This definitely applies to the Insidious movies. I thought they're fun. I think the creature is scary looking. I think they do a great job of a through line of connecting all the characters together. And I think Insidious Chapter 3 actually is maybe my favorite one of the series. I think I especially like it because it's a prequel. So we get some of the backstory on how all of this stuff is happening to this one family. So again, the Insidious series is great. And if you're only going to watch one of them, you actually can start with Chapter 3 and not be lost.
I wish you could answer me, Mom. Mr. Atkins said he'd fail me if I was even a minute late again.
My mom died a year and a half ago. It's like sometimes I can feel her around me. Mom?
You have to be very careful. If you call out to one of the dead, all of them can hear you.
Alert. Alert. This program has been interrupted. Now hosting is host of the show, Gary Talks, Gary C. Warren. All right, we're back here again with Gary C. Warren. He is the host of the ever popular Gary Talks. Gary, before we jump into your number 3s, you have any October plans for Gary Talks? I know we're getting closer and closer to Halloween. Are you going to steer in the skid of that, or what are some of the future episodes coming?
Yeah, I recently did a Friday the 13th episode, so I was going to try to do one based on Halloween, but apparently
You're
the
afraid of
Halloween
angering me?
the Halloween cast makes more money than the Friday the 13th cast, so it's so far been a lot harder to get people, and I didn't want to rush it, so maybe next Halloween I'll try to do a ranking of that if I can get some of the cast. I'm really not doing a whole lot for Halloween type shows on the show. I've got one coming up at the end of October where I talk about 80s albums, and then the show's kind of going to slow down here in fall, but then I'll be back in December ranking my favorite Christmas films, and then all the year-end lists that we talk about, my top 10 TV shows, albums, and movies.
Yeah, for those of you who don't follow him on Facebook or Twitter, you pretty much track everything you watch every year and you post it. I wanted you to be proud of me because, as you know, both of our baseball teams are not in the playoffs, so I've had a lot more time. We're recording this on October 8th. I have watched 23 horror movies since October 1.
Wow. Wow. That is impressive. That is impressive. Now, are these all new watches? Or are these rewatches, mixture?
Mix. Yeah. The new one I've seen, though, that I think will become a rewatch was Late Night with the Devil. I thought it was excellent.
Great movie. Great movie.
Right. It was so, I can't remember being so gripped. And they took what could have been a really silly premise and played it straight. I thought they did a great job.
Highly recommend.
All right, let's talk your number threes, man, because I know what's weird for me is sometimes the 3 list was easier than the 2 list.
Yeah, and I think it's because there are so many good number 2s. There are a decent number of number 3s, but it's not so much of, man, I got these 10, how do I whittle it down to 5?
Yeah.
As much as it is, finding the 3 is just like, oh yeah, I've always liked this number 3. And speaking of Late Night with the Devil, we'll start with my number 5 favorite number 3 is Omen 3, The Final Conflict. I love the Omen franchise.
Mm-hmm.
There is a silliness to this one, though, with Sam Neill calling Jesus the Nazarene constantly. There's a weird feel to it that I don't really know if they're in on the joke, if we're in on the joke. But I really do like the whole process of the Antichrist rising to prominence in government. And I think it works for a fairly creepy movie that at the same time is still kind of like, is this supposed to be a comedy or not?
Right. You know what in a couple episodes, we're going to have you on to talk remakes and requels. I would love to see a requel of this one where Sam Neill does reprise the role of Damien and play it straight.
Yeah.
Because he was great in the part. And I think he does menacing really, really well. All right. What's your number 4?
Number 4 is one that we had talked about a little bit last week because Evil Dead is one of my favorite franchises, and that is Army of Darkness. Now, I know, a lot of the more horror fans dislike Army of Darkness because of how silly it gets. But for me, because I had been looking so forward to what happens after Evil Dead 2 for years when it was finally released, it was one I could not wait to see. And while it does tread a little on the silly side as opposed to horror, I still really, really love it. And it's a fun continuation of the franchise.
And to me, because it was the first one I saw, as we mentioned last week, but my man crush on Bruce Campbell is eternal. And then I got to meet him and he's like the nicest guy. Like it was just, it was nice to see, you meet a celebrity, we got to interview him. And it was like, oh, you're really as cool as I was hoping you'd be.
Yeah. I think what you see is what you get. And that is awesome.
Yeah. And of course he had his turn as Gus's psychiatrist in the last season of Psych, which was excellent. All right. What's your number 3?
Number 3 for me is one that it seemed for a long time no one liked this movie, but apparently we all liked it and we just were ashamed to talk about it. But that is Exorcist 3, which I think is a brilliant film. Has, for my money, possibly the greatest jump scare. And I hate jump scares, but I think it is a brilliant jump scare.
I just want the viewers to know that I recorded my bit already because I did call it the greatest jump scare of all time. So it's not like I'm like, hey, Gary, that's a great idea. I think I'll go slip that into my monologue.
You're like, for the record.
Yeah.
But, I think Exorcist 3 might be a little scarier than the original Exorcist, only because the original Exorcist has a horror film vibe to it, while Exorcist 3 almost feels like a procedural Silence of the Lambs type movie. But instead of it being an actual serial killer, you are dealing with the devil. So I found that to be a creepier thing, and I love Exorcist 3.
Yeah. So Exorcist 3 is always near my top, and I'm glad that you mentioned that it's a little different because I think what was smart was, first of all, bringing William Peter Blatty back to do the book and to adapt his own book and direct it, but the fact that it's not trying to be the original, like, yeah, Pazuzu is back, but the mixturing of it with a slasher film, which was so creative and unique, and recognizing that, okay, we're doing the sequel of one of the greatest, not even just horror movies, but greatest films of all time. We can't do the same thing again. They tried it in Exorcist 2 and everybody fell asleep.
Yeah.
Also, Exorcist 3 features my buddy Hoyt Richards standing next to his buddy Fabio in the dream sequence. So there you go. All right, number 2.
All right, this is the one that I think is going to make you mad. So, get the stick to put in your teeth to bite down hard. But Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Now, I realize that, technically, is it a part 3 because it's not continuing the story? But since it is the number 3 of the franchise, and I love Season of the Witch, and to me, it's a yearly watch right along there with Halloween 1. I like them both in different ways, but I just I love the song. I love everything about the movie. And for once, the Irish get to be the villains.
Right. Again, I just think it's so funny because our previous guest also mentioned my hatred of that movie. Maybe I should be a little less transparent of the things I like and love. All right, what are you going to round this up though? What is your closer?
My favorite is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. It is,
Right,
I think,
why, because I agree, but tell me why that's it for you.
It's the best of the franchise. It takes what was great about the first one and it expands it. As we talked about in sequels, I love when sequels expand their world, and this one really expanded it. You also get the kids, who become the Dream Warriors, are almost superheroes trying to fight back on Freddy. And it was the movie where Freddy became cool without being a joke. So
Sure.
he got a lot of great lines. Welcome to primetime, bitch. Let's get high. All of those great lines. And I think all of that is because the script was written by the great Frank Darabont. And I think that it shows through, and it has a Dokken theme song. You can't go wrong.
You can't go in a video.
And Patricia Arquette was so adorable.
Patricia Arquette. Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, or the fingernail on the teenager. The idea of expanding what can happen in a dream and having it be, because that's some shit okay, well, I'm fucking Batman, Freddy, let's get after it, right? Like, right. I love and all that. For as much as like the wizard kind of bores me, but I'm beautiful and bad. I mean, people make fun of that line now, but I still think it rings badass. All right, he is Gary C. Warren. We're gonna see you back here next week when we get into the Quattros. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Now, I fully admit that we are going to be getting into some, oh my God, so bad it's good territory. And that's just how it goes sometimes with third parters, particularly in the horror genre. Sometimes they can get a little jump over the sharky, which is appropriate for Jaws 3D, the next one on my list. Look, we could point at all the problems of the movie that you maybe think the movie is therefore bad. I look at the problems with the movie and think it's awesome. First of all, we've got a big great white. I think this one's 35 feet in length. You see, they grow 5 feet every movie, steroids, I guess, performance enhancing drugs. I don't know. But you've got a great white shark that's stuck in a sea world, and you have Dennis Quaid, full on Texan mode, playing the son of a New York cop who grew up in Massachusetts. You see what I mean? It doesn't make any sense that he sounds like he's got a southern drawl and that his brother lived in South Dakota. Doesn't matter. You know why? Because the movie itself is awesome. You have got rock star dolphins in it. I actually got to meet Porky before Porky passed. Look, if you haven't watched Jaws 3D, you have to watch it. Yes, it's bad, but if you get the opportunity to see it in actual old school 3D, I got to go with my buddy Mike Donis once. We had an absolute blast. Sometimes it's okay to kick back and just enjoy a movie, even if the movie isn't in the same depth as the original film, still worth your time.
Look at the fish! Holy shit!
Down here at number 6, the Bates Motel is open again with Psycho 3, which was directed by Anthony Perkins. Not as good as 2. Probably maybe a little too close to a retread of the original plot. But 1, again, Anthony Perkins is so good in the movie of creating a very sympathetic character. You've got a wonderful 3-dimensional world that's been built up. In the shining part of this movie, for me anyway, is Jeff Fahey and the weird love scene where he's like directing with the pink lights over the woman. You see what I mean? It's Jeff Fahey. He's all sweaty and he's got weird lights. That sells the movie on its own.
Mother.
I love the dear silver that shines in your hair, and the brow that's all furrowed and wrinkled with care. I kiss the dear fingers so toil-worn for me. Oh, God bless you and keep you, dear mother. Bates.
Now look, I am not necessarily your Evil Dead fan. Didn't quite get it, I guess, but I love Army of Darkness. I like chainsaws and boomsticks, and honestly, even though I'm not a big fan of those movies, I have a huge man crush on Bruce Campbell. Who doesn't? Got to interview him once. Nicest guy, you wouldn't believe it. And he has a great turn on Psych after being referenced throughout the entire series. So, Army of Darkness.
He's a 20th century guy.
For that arrogance, I shall see you dead.
Trapped in the Middle Ages.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. This is my boomstick!
Okay. We're back in the weird 3D realm. That is Friday the 13th, Part 3. Yeah, it's goofy. Yeah, it's really trying to make those effects work. This is one I haven't actually seen in a 3D projection, so I bet it does come together really nice. But at the end of the day, it's the most iconic film in the franchise, as one might argue, because it's where Jason gets the mask. Friday the 13th, Part 3.
Hey, I dropped your wallet. I'm sorry. I got it. Who are you? What are you doing? Hey, now cut that out right now. That's not funny.
Alert, alert. We interrupt your program to bring you Daniel Baldwin, contributing writer for the horror website Dread Central. Now we are back with our horror guru. We are back with Daniel Baldwin. We're going to be talking about the number threes. If you're going to put together a movie marathon of the Part 3 of a series, I've already given up about a third of mine, Daniel, but I wanted to check in and see how the expert was thinking. So if you got to pick 5 movies to introduce to somebody, and you're only going to pick the Part 3 of a trilogy or of a quadrilogy or whatever it is, what are the 3 you're going to go with?
This one was a little tricky as well because it pains me to leave off movies that may or may not be on your list, like Army of Darkness or Friday the 13th Part 3 or Halloween 3. I know your thoughts on that one, but or even Son of Frankenstein. But I just had to go with my gut on this one, both in terms of what I love and what I think would play well together. So I finally managed to whittle it down.
All right, let's hit us up. Let's do it.
All right. Again, in no particular order, I've got Twins of Evil, which is the 3rd installment in Hammer's Countess Karnstein trilogy. So you've got a little vampire action to kick things off. Going more recent with the prog rock linked slasher Terrifier 2. I'm not a big fan of the first 2 installments in that series, but I do like this one.
Okay. Good to know, because I haven't dove into that series yet. So now I know.
And then moving on, George Romero's Day of the Dead.
Okay.
And then The Exorcist 3.
Oh yeah, has to be on anybody's list. We talked in our last episode about sequels that were better than they had any business being. This is one of those 2.
Yes, it is. And then lastly, I couldn't not put A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors on this list.
Yeah, so I want to talk about your last 2. First of all, Exorcist 3, one of the rare experiences that I've had where the theatrical cut is superior to the director's cut. Your thoughts on the comparison of both of those?
First off, I agree with you. I know the studio forced an exorcism scene on him for the final bit, and then they added the exorcist character who, spoiler alert, doesn't quite make it through his exorcism.
One of the
But
most
that's
ghastly
actually
deaths
not.
in yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal, especially for that series. The addition of the exorcism scene doesn't really, swing me one way or another on those cuts. But what the big thing that does for me, other than I think the fact that the edit on the theatrical cut is tighter, is you get more Jason Miller in the theatrical cut. You get more Father Damien. As great as Brad Dourif is in the director's cut when he's doing all the Father Damien scenes, it just lacks a little bit of punch. And I think having Jason Miller in there for all of that just really raises the whole thing to another level.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, definitely, definitely. All right, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I just got done. I've done a rewatch of the whole series. We were talking offline before we started here that when your baseball team is out, you can watch a lot of horror movies. But I also finally got to watch the Never Sleep Again documentary. Dream Warriors really is kind of a cutting edge movie for not just the series but horror in general. Like it really kind of was as important to the genre almost as the first one. What are some of the things that really connect with you about part 3, other than the nurse scene?
I think you're right on the cutting edge front. I think it really, and there were other examples of this before then, but I think it really ushers in a wave of horror fantasy, kind of like big, wild, fantastical horror, more than just effect sequences, just in terms of sheer imagination. And that, of course, that carried over into the next couple installments of the series, but it also is actually applicable to Terrifier 2, which is on my list.
I think some of it I think some of it you're right. It I don't know how to articulate this, but in part 3 it seems like you're less aware you're in a dream. It takes you a little bit longer to know you're in a dream. And I kind of think that works to its play. Like when she's watching, my favorite one is Welcome to Prime Time, bitch. But that whole bit, you really are not aware that she's fallen asleep until it starts to turn. And I love that effect on it as well, where we get something really creative, but also the suspense of when it's going to happen.
Yeah, the transitions are slower and more dread inducing. And then when it finally busts open that you're in a dream, it just goes through the roof on it each time.
Yeah, each time. All right. Well, he is Daniel Baldwin. We're going to make sure you have all of his follow information on here. Daniel, thanks for jumping on Jim's Movin' Picture Show.
Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
I said it was the most probably solid horror franchise top to bottom, which means it's going to be on the list again. And that is Scream 3. I do agree with some people that it is arguably the worst film of the franchise. That they do try to hem a little too close to self-parody. Jay and Silent Bob being in the movie doesn't make any sense to me either. But I still think it's a really well put together slasher thriller. I think all the performances are game. And I kind of like the idea of one puppet master that's been through the first 2 films. So Scream 3 continues our run of Scream franchises on this list.
Excuse me, I am Gail Weathers, and I'm here researching with the police. This photo was taken at the studio. Her name is Maureen Prescott. Back then it was probably Roberts. Hey, are you...
No.
But you look just...
Like her? I've been hearing it all my life.
It's uncanny.
I was up for Princess Leia. I was this close. So who gets it? The one who sleeps with George Lucas.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up a sore subject for you.
Sure you didn't. None of them did. So how can I help you?
Number 2, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. I think actually the best film in the franchise. I also really like New Nightmare, and of course I like the original, but there's something about Dream Warriors that I really like. I think in part because the dreamers are more empowered, you get just more dynamic scenes. I mean, the worm, the just the I'm beautiful and bad, that whole thing. Some people might think it's cheesy. I thought it was a really crowd-pleasing moment, and it's one I can definitely watch over and over and over again, especially after watching it. I'm unlikely to ever sleep again.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
And number one, there are two versions of the movie, and I tend to prefer the theatrical cut. I'm going to do a cross comparison again, but it is The Exorcist 3. I think it's the best third movie out there. Clearly, it's number one on my list. And it also falls into the category of better movie than it had any business being. And I think it's because they brought back William Peter Blatty to write and direct the film. The second movie is the biggest snooze fest ever. And the other movies that came after, just they're train wrecks. In fact, like two movies are the same script. They just couldn't figure out, I don't know. I'll have Daniel tell you what happened. He knows more than me. Outside of the sequel television show, it is the film closest to being worthy to the original film, which is a masterpiece. And it has, I think, the greatest jump scare in cinema history.
I believe in death. I believe in pain. I believe in cruelty and corruption, you son of a bitch!
Two's company, three's a crowd. Unless we're talking about third horror movies in a franchise. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next week for episode 3, we'll be on number 4s. Math is hard. I went to film school.
Welcome to Jim's Moving Picture Show. Welcome to Jim's Moving Picture Show, where the popcorn is buttery, the jokes are cheesy, and the movies are scary. Or funny. Or he's a little all over the place. And now your host of the Movie Picture Show, a guy who's seen Jaws a million times, has a zillion movie t-shirts, speaks fluent movie quotes, a guy who really should get out more. Here's your host, Jim Christopher.